In our wedding vows, we might say to love and to cherish till death do us part. But have you ever thought about the difference between the word love and cherish? Hello, church, and welcome back to our discussion of different books from our resource desk. Today, we're going to look at the book Cherish by Gary Thomas. And in today's video, we're going to look through about 10 of the 13 chapters and just pull out some highlights from this book that focuses exclusively on that word cherish. Now, there is a difference between the two words, and it's first a difference in attitude. Where love is foundational to the marriage, the word cherish is more about the attitude of marriage. So the author is making a distinction between the two words, love and cherish, kind of like two sides of the same coin. They're not the same word, but they both go together very, very closely. And he uses 1 Corinthians 13, contrasted with Song of Solomon, to kind of show some of those differences between the two. And he says, love is gracious and altruistic, but cherishing is enthusiastic and enthralled. Love is quiet and understated, and cherishing is bold and loud on behalf of the one that you cherish. Loving is selfless, but cherishing is not just selfless, it's praising the other person. Love doesn't want something bad for one person, but cherishing wants something good for the other person. Love puts up with a lot. Cherishing enjoys a lot. Love is about commitment, and cherishing is about delight and passion. So they both go hand in hand. They're not contrasting, but there are differences between the two. And it's primarily about the attitude that you approach your marriage with. And it should be with an attitude of cherishing your spouse. The second point he makes is about cherishing is learning to hold somebody dear. Now, Adam and Eve were the example of the first marriage in the scriptures, and obviously they didn't have much choice. They had to cherish one another. They were the only ones created for each other. But that's kind of just the point. In God's design with the first marriage, there was only one man and one woman. And when Adam saw the rest of creation and he had named all of the other creatures, he saw that they each had a mate, but for him there was no equal counterpart. There was no human. So when Eve was created, he said, "This is now bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman. She was taken out of a man." He realized immediately that this woman is like me, but not exactly like me. She's according to the opposite of me. She was an help meet for him. She was designed perfectly for him. And they were just this perfect fit because that's how God created them to be. So in Adam's eyes, and I think in the grand scheme of what marriage ought to be in this ideal, perfect Garden of Eden type setting of God's design, he was a one-woman kind of man. He looked at Eve as the source or the picture of beauty. And she, Eve, was a one-man kind of woman. She looked to Adam as the source of her fulfillment in marriage, and she didn't look anywhere else. And so in that same vein, as Christians, we're looking at our spouses and choosing contentment with our spouse. Now we can get to the comparison game and start to think that, well, the airbrushed version of a woman is the ideal spouse for me. But scriptures are trying to get us back to your spouse and say, no, you focus on your wife. If you're a man, you're a one-woman kind of man. And sometimes the steamy romance novels that many women will read will paint a fantasy picture of what a man can be in their mind. And that's all it is. It's fantasy. There's no man on earth that can live up to the kind of romance and the kind of passion that she's dreamt up in her mind about this fake man. And so the idea of the book is that, no, she needs to choose to be content with the man that God has placed her with. It's a choice and contentment for the husband and a choice and contentment for the wife. Not settling, not stagnating, but choosing to be content as a one-woman kind of man, as a one-man kind of woman. The third point he makes is that cherishing means learning to showcase your spouse. Now, I've seen some couples where it seems like there's a little bit of competition for attention. They're always putting each other down to lift themselves up, or everything the other person says feels like some kind of a dig. It feels like some kind of attack. And there's almost this vying for attention. Now, I married a firecracker kind of a girl. I love the energy that my wife brings to every situation. Those are the kinds of people that I love, that I'm drawn to. And when we were first dating, I remember thinking, oh no, is that gonna be okay? I mean, is this gonna be all right? And I remember conversations that my fiance at the time and I had, that we were going through, and she's going, oh, I see, Mrs. Davison, and I see this picture of maybe what a pastor's wife ought to be. And she's thinking, God's designed me with this certain type of personality that is it's very out there, it's very administrative, it's very by the book. I get a lot of things done, I'm very active. And so in her mind, she's almost thinking, has God designed me wrong? And we worked through that and tried to realize, no, God didn't make any mistakes when He formed and created my wife. She can still be a wonderful keeper at home, and she is. And she can still have a meek and quiet spirit, but that's not always a description that describes somebody's personality. There can be a meek and quiet spirit in a firecracker type of personality. And I love that she has that. In her mind, when she was thinking about dating and the type of person that she would marry one day, before she and I met, she had in her mind that because her personality was here, she would need a personality that was even stronger and bolder and more aggressive. And if she was ever going to learn biblical submission, well, she would need somebody that was stronger to be able to force her down. And yet anytime she met a personality that was like that, it just clashed. I mean, it was like I bow up against that. It didn't work. And God has created me with a personality that's not bold and brash, and it's not aggressive in any way, pretty chill, pretty laid back. And when God put us together, she realized, oh, okay, this is how this can work. And I realized, man, this is just so much life that she can bring to my life, and to have two lives to be able to fit so perfectly together is just a wonderful testimony of just saying, man, God did this. And so I love highlighting my wife. I love that she can speak at ladies' engagements or help our church. I love who she is, and I love everything about her personality. I love the conversations she can have and she can carry, and I love her hosting abilities and the way she mothers our children. I love all that about her, and I want her to shine. And conversely, she wants me to shine. I mean, she's not threatened at all by me being the public face of our family and the pastor of our church. It's not a competition. It's this beautiful harmony that has happened in our marriage, and I want that for every marriage. And I believe that's what God wants. When a marriage cherishes one another, well, you want the other person to shine. And that's a picture of what cherishing can be. The fourth chapter in the book says that cherishing is noticing and honoring one another. And he tells a story of a pastor who, in the church setting, there was a husband that was sitting on one side was his wife, and on the other side was his buddy, his guy friend, his male friend. And when the pastor was preaching, he would tell a joke and the entire crowd would laugh. And that happened 3 or 4 times, and every single time, the eyes of the husband went to his male friend, and they would look at each other and they would laugh together. They would elbow each other. They would enjoy that moment together. And every single time she would look to her husband to connect with him, but his head always turned the other way. That happened 2 or 3 times before finally her shoulders just slumped over and she just sat dejectedly. And he imagines the conversation on the car ride home. Hey, what's wrong? Nothing. It's fine. Oh, come on, tell me what's wrong. Now, his act of not connecting with her, of not noticing her, was an act of not cherishing her. It's not this form of domestic abuse many times. It's not domestic violence that breaks many marriages apart. It's just a wife that feels invisible. It's a wife whose husband is connecting with everybody else except for her. And it can go the other way too. Many times a wife might be so connected online to her phone that as soon as she gets home or as soon as he gets home, they can never connect because she's always on her phone. She's always distracted with everybody else's lives except for the relationship at home, except for the marriage relationship. And I think that's such a shame that in car rides, many times, everybody in the car will just be on their phone and it's dead silent, where it could be a chance to connect with one another. I heard of a pastor friend who has a phone jail, that as soon as he gets home from work, everybody's phones go in this drawer, they're charged all night, they don't touch the phones for the entire evening. They're just in there and it's family time. And I think that's a great habit to get into because those phones can distract us from nourishing and cherishing by our attention toward one another. And so cherishing might just look like turning your attention towards somebody. John Gottman calls it catching bids. And bids are when a husband or a wife will say something that's of interest to him or to her, an interest to that person, and that's a bid for attention, that's a bid for connection. And you can either turn toward that bid or away from that bid. I watched a funny video the other day of a guy that was driving down the road with his wife, and he looks over at a house, and he was a heating and air conditioning guy, and he says, "Hey, look at that house over there. I did all the duct work. I did all the heating and air conditioning in that house." And the subtitle on the video said, "What every husband wishes their wife would say." And it put words in her mouth, but her response was something like, "Wow, that is incredible. I bet they're sitting inside that house right now, so excited about the warm air that's coming out of their vents, and there's snow outside. And I bet they're saying, that heating and air guy did such a good job on our heating system. I bet the ductwork in our attic is just perfect. There's no holes. I bet it's all secured just right. Man, I'm so happy for our heating and air guy." Now, obviously that's probably not what they're saying in the home, but the point is that he sent out the bid, he sends out the pitch for something that's important to him. His job is something that's important to him. And the wife can either respond by saying, "Oh, stop talking about work." Or she can respond by saying, "Oh, that's nice. How long did it take to do that attic? I bet that was a really hard job, wasn't it? Tell me more about that." And asking questions and showing interest in something that, quite frankly, she's probably not interested in. And that's okay. It's not about being interested in the topic. It's about it being interested in the person. It's about wanting to get to know the person in a deeper way. And when he bids and she leans into it, John Gottman says that of the successful marriages that he polled, he found that 90% of the bids were met with enthusiasm and interest. Every single time a spouse says something, your attention can go toward him or her by just asking questions, being curious about what that means and what it means to that person. That is cherishing. Fifth, cherishing is about protecting one another and killing contempt. He says, "He's not a chef, he's a cook." Well, he can call me a chef. No, he can't, because you're not. A chef makes things from scratch. You just heat things up. It's not the same thing. The author says, "I'd been trying to involve a quiet man in the discussion, so I brought up what he did, referring to him as a chef. Don't chefs usually make such and such?" His wife jumped on the offensive, declaring that her husband was not a chef, and no one in the entire universe should ever use that label when referring to her husband. See, he had worked at a retirement home, prepared meals every single day for 200 of the residents that were there. And so to him, it was a matter of pride. He was thankful for his job, and she was demeaning to him. She looked at him with contempt. Something in their marriage had got under her skin, and they had moved from a position where in most marriages they start at the dating phase, which means you can do no wrong. I mean, everything is flowery and beautiful. Well, you somehow move from being able to do no wrong till you move to you can do no right. I mean, everything that you do is you're an idiot. You're so stupid. I can't believe you didn't think about that. Why do you always say that? And you move from frustration to bitterness to contempt. This anger of the soul, this in-depth hatred of your spouse. And nothing kills marriages faster than contempt. So, in order for a successful, healthy marriage, you've got to kill contempt. You've got to choose to let that bitterness aside and choose to believe the best by cherishing your spouse. And this cherishing shows up in areas like wanting to protect your spouse, not blame your spouse. Oh man, we're late again. We're always late because of this one. That always making me late. Well, instead of that, protect your spouse instead of throwing them under the bus all the time. With basically everything you do, you're either protecting or you're attacking. And I think we should go to war for our spouse, not go to war against our spouse. Let's cherish our spouse by removing contempt. Sixth, cherishing teaches us that indulging our spouse or helping our spouse can actually be spiritually healing to our spouse. Now, some situations in some marriages, there's one or perhaps both in the marriage who have never experienced true biblical charity and cherishing. They have no idea what unconditional love actually is supposed to look like. They have no reference point for what the love of Christ is to them. There's nothing in their life that has ever experienced love without strings attached, or love like Christ loves the church and gave himself for it. And so if you're in a Christian marriage, if you're the Christian in the marriage, well, you might have an opportunity to show cherishing to your spouse in ways that they've never experienced before, and show them the love of Christ in ways that can heal their spirit. The gospel has had a way of changing you and of healing you. And so what you have the potential to do is to show that exact kind of healing to your spouse. Now that might come through simple cherishing, forgiving, forbearing them, being humble and waiting for God to change them. And it's not going to change overnight, especially if there's deep-rooted anger or bitterness, or especially if there's some kind of trauma or a history of abuse or some kind of problems that you've worked through and there's no trust that's there. I'm not saying trust is going to be built overnight, but the point of that chapter is an interesting chapter that you have the chance to promote healing in your marriage through Jesus Christ working through you. One of the ways the author had seen done was a wife that kept a journal of all the good things that her husband had done for her. And it was a secret journal. She kept it, and then after a year of writing journal entries, she gave that to him. And he read that whole thing in one sitting. It was the smallest things that she was noticing throughout the day-to-day, and she would date it. And as often as she could, she was looking for things to be thankful for, looking for ways to lift him up and to thank him for the little things that he had done. It was simple things like, thank you for hanging the Christmas lights when it was freezing outside. You want us to have that joy. And it was so cold, that must have been a terrible thing to have gone through. Another entry was, thank you for traveling. I know it must be hard. I could see how tired you were when you walked out the door on February 6th. You do such a good job of providing for our family. Another entry was something like, man, thank you for when you came home from that business trip. Even though you were dead tired, you still took time to play with the kids, and you didn't let them know at all how tired you were. I really admired that about you. And he said this about it. He said, it makes me aspire to be the man that she thinks I am. And that's good. If you want to inspire change in somebody, then maybe a journal would be one of those ways that you could inspire them through your cherishing. What if you used a journal to get you out of this contempt mode and into thankfulness mode? Maybe you're in a dip right now in your marriage and you need to climb out. Well, thankfulness will help you climb out of that dip. And maybe a journal can be just the thing that you need to find those areas that are good and focus on those. Well, that is cherishing. Now, the 7th chapter was a quick little checkup, just a short chapter on basically saying never give up on cherishing, keep going, push through any of the low points. But then the 8th chapter was on using our words intentionally to cherish, to nourish and to cherish one another. And so it's not just the words we say, but the tone we say them in too. The author said after we landed, Lisa heard a doctor take a phone call, and it was in clipped tones. He was cruel and short with his wife. There was no warm-up. There was no endearing, "Hello, sweetie." There was just this harsh and hard utilitarianism. "Yeah, okay, well, I'm still on the plane. Yeah, whatever." And after several phrases like this, his voice suddenly got soft and cheerful, and he goes, "Hi, Alex, how you doing, buddy? Oh, I can't wait to get home and see you. Yeah, that's great." And then obviously his wife gets back on the phone, and it's back to those clipped, short phrases. "I already said we can go as soon as we get home. All right, fine, bye." There was no "I love you." There was no gentleness to his tone. There was just that short, clipped anger. There was no enthusiasm to see her like there was enthusiasm to see his son. And so you can tell in the tone of somebody's voice whether there's cherishing going on or not. And so cherish with our words and even the tone behind our words. When you speak to your spouse, speak in a cherishing tone and with cherishing words. He said early in their marriage, Jacqueline heard a woman tell her, "Never say a bad word about your husband." That was huge to me, Jacqueline said. "Where I grew up, men were losers and women had to wear the pants. Every wife I knew talked badly about her husband. I'm so glad a woman told me that marriage didn't have to be like that we didn't have to talk to each other that way." That kind of negative talk would have been so hurtful to Donnie, her husband, if I decided to act like the wives that I had seen growing up. And what a powerful testimony of this woman who is deciding to change the tone and the words of her marriage, and that changed the whole direction of her life because of that. And what a powerful use words can be. Affectionate, kind words, used intentionally and with purpose, not just, "Oh yeah, you look fine," but "Man, your eyes sparkle. You look really good today. I really like the way that dress looks on you." Now you've got to figure out between you and your spouse what that looks like and how you're going to make that happen. My wife and I have this really just fun, sometimes sarcastic little approach to some of the ways that we deal with each other. And I think it's hilarious. I'll get turned around in a car sometimes and she'll help me navigate all the time. And, in 2 miles, you're going to need to take a right-hand turn. So it's not a last-minute lane change. We've figured out ways to communicate with each other that's respectful and kind. And then there's some times where if I feel like she's crossing a line, we'll make a little joke and she'll laugh about it and I'll laugh about it. And that's okay. And the author talks about a situation like that in the book Cherish, where he and his wife would, he'd try to help her navigate when they got out of an elevator, which way to turn. Sometimes she'd turn the wrong way, and he'd grab her arm or he'd say something and try to make a joke, and it was never received well. And so finally, after a couple of these little arguments, he just says, well, how do you want me to say it? And she said, "Just say a simple, 'This way, hun.'" And she said, "Exactly in that tone, and we'll be fine." And so he said, the next time we got out of an elevator and she started to go the opposite direction, I just said, "This way, hun." And she turned around and smiled at me, looked in my eye, and just said, "Perfect." And they laughed, and they still laugh about it to this day, that those simple little ways that she helped him realize, say these words in this tone. They just had to communicate about how to handle that situation in the future. And that communication's totally doable for every couple. You just figure out how to cherish your spouse and the ways that you like to be cherished. And that brings us to point number 9, which is cherish your unique spouse. What works for one couple may not work for every couple. One couple might want you to spend more. Oh, you never buy me any gifts. But another couple might be spending too much money on gifts, and you shouldn't spend more. One couple might want to talk more, and another couple might need to talk less and listen more. And so every couple is going to be unique. Every individual is going to be unique. You just have to find what works in your marriage and what works in your home and how your personalities work together. And so even if there's stereotypes, what usually works for men, maybe in your home is more related to the woman. And maybe the stereotypes for most women relate in your marriage to the husband, and you're a little embarrassed about that. Well, no, you have to relate to one another within your unique marriage. And so relate to your unique spouse. The 10th and last point in today's video is that cherishing your spouse might mean being patient with your spouse's sins. Now, we might put some kind of ultimatum. I will cherish them when they stop, and you fill in the blank. And there's kind of a conditional love there. There's a conditional cherishing. I'm not going to cherish them until they, and you fill in the blank with some kind of ultimatum. And yeah, I'm just going to read Ephesians chapter 4, verses 1 through 3 in conclusion. I therefore, the prisoner of the Lord, beseech you that ye walk worthy of the vocation wherewith ye are called, with all lowliness and meekness, with long suffering, forbearing one another in love, endeavoring to keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. Now you have to realize I've got to be patient with my spouse. I've got to put up with some things, and I may have been putting up with some things for a while, but I don't want to just write them off as a lost cause. I want God to keep on working in them and through them, and maybe God's using me and my spouse's life to bring them to that place of repentance and bring them to that place of following the Lord. And you can choose to believe the best about them. You can choose to keep loving them unconditionally. You can choose that for your spouse. But just be patient sometimes with their sins. And that's often what cherishing looks like. Now, in the 11th and 12th chapters of the book, there's very practical suggestions on how to develop that cherishing mindset from Philippians 4, 8, and 9, and many practical suggestions. I encourage you to look the book up. It's available if you're at our church at our resource desk, and if not, you can buy it anywhere that Christian books are sold. And I encourage you to look into this one, pull out some more practical ideas. But that gave you at least a snapshot of the book, and I hope that's a help for you, and I really hope that it's a help for your marriage. God bless you, and we'll see you in the next video. Hey, thank you for watching this video. We started this channel because we want to help bring the Bible home. And so if you enjoyed this video, if it was a help to you, would you mind clicking the like button and subscribing to our channel? And that way you'll never miss another video. We look forward to seeing you in the next one. God bless you.